We just talked to Dieter Brock, and now we're looking for Robert Young. Good morning, Robert. It's Mike Richards from rawmikeRichards.com.
Good morning. How are you?
I got to tell you, I'm a little giddy. I feel like, when the Beatles came on and the teenage girls started screaming. We just talked to Dieter, and that was truly one of the thrills of my life. He has always been one of my favorite athletes of all time, let alone quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League. And I think if you're going to pick a subject where you're going to have at least enough background on a guy and enough true material that makes the book engaging, I don't know if you could have found a better guy or a better subject than Dieter Brock.
Yeah, it was a fascinating project to get to know him and hear his story. And, unfortunately back when he played, there was no internet, there was no emails. And, we only know what we're told to know. We don't know a lot about the background of these guys. And I learned that when I was working on Lyle Bauer's book, to spend some time with these guys and just hear the old stories. And it was just fascinating.
Well, the one thing that he said, and I'm so glad that he said it, because I always imagined in my head when he went down to the Rams that it was that way. He was Roy Hobbs. He was the natural. He's the guy that came out of nowhere, was older than what you would expect for a guy to walk into that dressing room. And he talked about, and he explained, he goes, it was like the natural. And I thought, it just is, again, that movie is one of the most, in terms of its legs. People still talk about Roy Hobbs because of the nature of the story. But here's a guy who's a real life Roy Hobbs.
Definitely, yes. There was, it was a remarkable story.
Robert, David Bastel here. So good to talk to you.
Nice jersey, David.
Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't realize you were such a Dieter Brock fan.
Oh.
Him and his wife stayed with us for about a week.
Yep.
A couple of months ago, and I've got his pillowcase if you'd like it.
Don't do that, Robert. I'm telling you.
You know what? You and I will trade off emails after the show. Thank you, sir. I will accept that. You know what? So growing up, and you heard the previous interview, and you know what? I followed him. You watched him as a fellow Winnipegger as well. Is there something that surprised you in the book that, by the way, comes out at the end of the month, that you weren't expecting to hear from Dieter? It's just like you said, there was no internet, there was nothing like that, but you did watch him. You did go to the games. He was part of the Manitoba fabric, and he was the guy of the 80s. Is there something that kind of caught you off guard when you were actually doing the back and forth and the interviewing and prepping for this book?
The regret.
Right.
The regret for leaving Winnipeg, and how much he still he loves this city. In fact, when he was here, both him and his wife on two separate occasions said that they would love to come back.
Wow. Because
I was really struck by, I'll be honest, Robert, when he was as forthcoming about that particular emotion, I said, I almost don't want to ask. I'm a little, it's people's personal lives. And this is not a show, as you can see. This is not Meet the Press. This isn't exactly the hard-hitting, where I'm trying to make someone cry. It's not that kind of show. But being such huge fans, it was, just an unbelievable moment that doesn't really happen in any other sports, where you see two key guys from teams switch teams. I mean, Tom Clements for Dieter Brock is a crazy story. And yet he was very honest about that. I wish I hadn't have done it. And I think there's very few guys. And, going back to his honesty about coming out of Birmingham and talking about, Jacksonville State and talking about, just the fact that, football really wasn't what he was thinking he was going to do for his life. He wanted to be a baseball player.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Until he got that chance to throw the ball that first time in high school.
Yeah.
And, learning about him, he was basically just a kid that wanted to throw the ball. He had, coming out of Jacksonville State, the being a small college, the NFL really didn't have their eyes on him. He didn't have anybody to go to for advice. He just wanted to throw the ball the best way he could. And when Bud Riley approached him, that was the direction that he took. But what was fascinating was during the time when he was hitting the records here in Winnipeg and in Canada, people in the States still didn't know who he was. In fact, I found some old newspaper articles from his hometown that said he was the quarterback for the Winnipeg Jets.
Oh,
jeez. Oh, man.
Here's a guy who had numbers equal to Joe Namath, and they had no idea who he was. And from doing Dieter's book and Lyle's, I found out that it's a real. It's hard for these guys to come from the States up here because the NFL is really ingrained in them from the time they're in they're playing community club football. And Ray Yauch was one of the ones who said that the NFL is just so romanticized that anything less is a real step down for these guys, and that's not the case.
And paths are always different, and yet they're very rarely even remotely close to what Dieter's was. The only guy I can think, Dave, necessarily that would be in a similar category, and again, it's not exactly the same, but someone who'd kind of a little bit older, had been around, is probably Kurt Warner. I think Kurt Warner's the only other guy I can really think of that would fit into that category. But even still, it was a lot different because, he wasn't starting, his first game when he was 34. I mean, that is just remarkable.
Yeah.
It also speaks to the kind of the physical shape and what he did to get stronger. I mean, all of that stuff. That's why I think this book is going to be extremely fascinating, Robert.
Well, to stay in shape. I mean, I spoke to a couple of people from Birmingham who were friends, and Mike, you mentioned about the weighted balls. And there's a fellow by the name of Snapper Lancaster who said that Dieter used to stretch this rubber tarp between two trees in his backyard, and he would throw the 5-pound ball 400 times a day for a month.
Wow.
And then he would go down to the 4-pound ball and throw that 400 times a day.
And if I want to hear a story like that, I want to make sure it comes from a guy named Snapper Lancaster.
Yeah, exactly.
So going back to what you said about so Brock spends almost a decade in Winnipeg. If the story is Dieter Brock in 2018, does he only spend 1 year in the CFL before he gets that chance in the NFL? Because it almost seems that these days you're well, for all intents and purposes, you're snapped up pretty quick, aren't you?
Yes. That exactly. One of the things that who's the loyalty to when these guys play? Sure. Is it to the team?
Right.
Is it to the community, or is it to themselves and their family? Dieter and his family moved 24 times in his career.
Wow.
Look, that's incredible. I mean, that's
between Winnipeg and Birmingham. And then, the Los Angeles deal, it was 24 times throughout his career. And coming to Winnipeg, school starts in the South in the States in August.
Yes.
So his wife and kids would have to leave, and he'd be up here by himself for 3 or 4 months. I talked to Tom Burgess when I was doing Lyle's book, and he had the same sentiment, is that you have to, at some point, you have to make a choice. Yeah. Is it family first, or is it football?
Yeah, I mean those are the tougher questions. Certainly back then they weren't getting the massive contracts that made them literally set for life.
Right.
This wasn't that kind of money. But
right.
Robert, thank you so much for actually allowing us to talk to you today, and of course that you're helping arranging talking with Dieter Brock, because that was just such a thrill for me. He is again one of these guys that I you immediately think of when I think of the CFL. I see number 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thanks for all the support.
And officially, the book is released on, is it October the 22nd? And where can people get it when they're watching this? I know there's a website, but explain everything so we could get it out there and people could get in front of this before it actually does drop in about, almost a little over a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon.com now. It's in a couple of the stores here in Winnipeg, McNally Robinson, and a couple of chapter stores. The official launch is going to be October 23rd at McNally Robinson here in Winnipeg, and Dieter will be there with some of the other alumni. And then we've got a couple of chapter stores on Thursday, and then another one on Saturday, and we're hoping to go to the actual Bomber game on Friday night.
Oh, that's fantastic. Robert, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate all your help as well, my friend.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That is Robert Young. He is the author of The Birmingham Rifle.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.